Welcome to the No BS Short-Term Rental Podcast, an unfiltered look into the global vacation and short-term rental industry.
I'm Mateo Bradford.
And I'm John Stokinger.
And this is our podcast. We bring the right people to the table at the right time, giving you an inside view and take on the short-term rental industry like no other podcast can.
Good morning, Mateo. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic, brother. How are you?
I am good. Week before the holidays about to kick off. I'm excited. We have a few banked, so life is good. So we're not scrambling. We're usually scrambling with these recordings. So I'm excited, and we got a great guest that I have never met before. So I'm pretty excited about that to dig in a little bit and learn some more. But
that's rare that happens, though, man. Like that we got somebody that you and I both think. I mean, that you don't know, or one of us doesn't know.
It's on rare occasion, but it happens sometimes, and it's super fun. They're interesting because I get to kind of sit back and try to soak it all in and get a little bit more. So it's fun. But the interesting thing too is just thinking about the holidays and getting ready for the new year. We're gonna go ahead and record the next episode, which might come up before this. So whatever is clever, it doesn't really matter. I'm excited about our recap episode we're going to do. We're going to look back at our top episodes of 2022. Mm-hmm. It'll just be you and me. We'll recap some of our favorites and kind of chat about that because we've had some stellar interviews this year. And next year is starting off with a bang as well. I mean, we have some huge interviews lined up. So we're pretty excited about that. But this one is no exception.
Hell of a year.
This is going to be a great interview. I'll let you take it from here.
Well, I'm excited at our guest today, and I'm going to keep this introduction nice and short because I want to.
I'm sorry.
I mean,
did you say nice and short? You keep an introduction nice and short?
Hey, man.
All right.
Don't get mad when I do what I do, okay? Anyways, no, seriously, before our guest leaves, because we're just getting out of it. No, seriously, I had the opportunity to meet our guest across the pond at a conference, really engaged in terms of what they were doing at the time, and it'll all make sense once I introduce who I'm talking about. But the one and only William Parry from ALTIDO, he's the CEO. We'll talk about that, and the co-founder of ALTIDO, which is a management and hospitality company on the other side of the pond. I know he's traveling all over the place. He'll be joining us today from London, but ALTIDO's story is one that is amazing and one that I think the industry can learn from: how to build efficiency, how to build brand, how to build a management brand style that guests can enjoy and that value the guest in a way that combining resources and other tactics we just don't see a lot of in the US. So let me stop talking. Will, welcome to the show. Thanks for finally coming on, man. It's been a while. It is good to see your face again, brother. How are you?
I'm very well, guys. Thank you for both your introductions. And I must say, if we're having a sort of highlights reel of 2022, I hope that one, I'm not too late to feature, and two, that this lives up to the promise so that I can make the grade. If not, I'm sure you'll slip me into 2023. But guys, really appreciated to be here and speak to your listeners. As mentioned, CEO and co-founder of ALTIDO, but the story goes back a bit longer. And it's been a great journey, but it's not over yet, and there's lots of excitements coming up.
Let's go back a little ways. I don't know how far you want to go back. Maybe we could take it to how you got into the industry and how you were able to come up and form the London Residents Club.
Yeah, it's a good place to start. Often get asked this question, and I wish I had I'm going to be very honest, and this is after all the no BS.
Yeah, there's no BS.
Yeah, so I'd love to say that it was a genius plan with a sort of long-term, 10-year vision that we've just executed to the letter, and we knew exactly where we're going. The reality, which I think is probably true for a lot of people who find themselves in this business, is it happened by chance, really. And it was I was working with a pal in London doing something completely different. We were making apple juice, which is is
for real.
Is not,
I don't think I ever knew that part. I don't think you knew that part. Apple juice.
Yeah, apple juice. Even on the internet now, and despite the fact on the internet you can find most things, even that story has begun to get erased. I was actually looking the other day to see if I could find our logo, but myself and Tom Archer, who is a co-founder of the London Residents Club and ALTIDO, and heads up our Portuguese office. Yeah, we used to make juice, and that was great. It was quite fun. People liked the juice, and we were profitable, but it was a tiny business, and it was causing a few problems because Apple HQ was my parents' home, and they didn't like the sort of vast quantities of apples that were all over their front garden. So yeah.
Wait, so hold up. Were you guys actually squeezing and like making the juice?
Yes, in the early days. Yeah,
Oh no, was this like mead or cider, or was this straight like non-alcoholic juice for kids and like apple juice?
Yeah, this was predominantly just straight juice. Although obviously, once you do start getting into juice, if you just leave it around for a bit, it turns into cider. So we did do a bit of cider for our own consumption. But yeah, we were making juice for a bit, which is a bit of a curveball. And I think, yeah, but it was great fun. Learned a bit about the basics of a business. But we realized we needed something else. And so we started looking at the London property market, which is always very hot. It's particularly hot back then, 2014. And we started getting to know that market, the real estate market, a bit better. And we saw the niche for a high-end property management business, which we set up, and we were very excited about. But we didn't have any clients, which was a bit of a problem. Till somebody came up to us and said, "You do short-term lets, right?" And I said, "Yes, that's exactly what we do." And we had our first client off the back of that. Hello, if you're listening. You are our first client. I won't mention his name, but yeah, then and then that kicked off the most extraordinary journey over the next 7 years to today. But yeah, it was founded with Tom in London. We took on a few units, and away we went.
So I know we're going to get through the whole trajectory, but I know, and you've gone through some different stages and some different complexities of different business together. But if you thought 7-8 years ago you were just a handful of units, what if you were to give an approximate unit count? Where are you at today?
So today is increasingly hard to answer that question, and the reason is because we've diversified from so much from those early days. We still do what we did in those early days. So we still have that first client I mentioned is still a client with us today, which is great. So we still do the kind of an owner with a unit that has some sort of availability, and they need the help of a company like us to help manage their short-term lets. So we still do that, but then we've diversified into multi-unit blocks, so from sort of service apartments, apart hotels, and then with the deal that this is coming right to the under end of the story that happened at the start of the year, where we merged with a much bigger company called Dover Vivo, which is a Italian-based company, which is a co-living company. So they do in beds and rooms. So we have units and we have beds, and then we have the kind of meeting in the middle of those two things, which is where you have a product that we call pop-up hotels, which is it's essentially student accommodation that in the summer the students aren't there because they're on holiday. So we flip that into a hotel, and there we might count that in rooms. So to put a long story short, you're looking at about 13,000 beds, and in terms of actual properties, it's over 2,500, but it'll be nearing 3,000 quite soon. So to go from those early, it's from the London Residence Club days, where probably a year into the business we probably had about 50 units. So it's a world away from them.
Some exponential growth there. We can easily say whether you're calling it beds or doors or whatever you're calling it. It was it's still impressive.
Yeah, so let's walk us through London Residence Club to the journey to ALTIDO.
Sure.
Definitely want to get into how you met the team, my boy Giancarlo and Michael and Thomas. It's a compelling story, so I don't want to lose that part. And John needs to hear it. So
yeah, it's a good. As I was actually writing a newsletter today and going over that exact story, so it's fresh in my mind. So London Residence Club, or LRC as it was there, was an independent property management business, short-term rental management business in London, as I mentioned. And we were growing through organic growth quite steadily. The first inflection point was 2017. So it was about 2 years into the business. And we were seeing a lot, as in most urban areas at that time, a lot of companies in our sphere entering the market, because the barriers to entry were pretty low. If you could get a hold of a property, you were kind of in business using things like Airbnb and Booking.com. And one of our competitors went bust. So they had about 100 units, and they went bust on the Monday, and then there was a process to buy the contracts, and by Thursday, the new owners had the contracts, and the new owners were us. So it was an incredibly fast process, and it was quite a nerve-wracking one for Tom and I, who hadn't done something like that before, and we were kind of competing with some quite well-funded big players in the industry, and we were.
And for any of those that have ever been involved with that, I mean, that's basically 4 straight days, like a couple hours of sleep,
Yeah,
there's no time to do anything else other than focus on this. It's high intensity, and it's insanity.
It's exactly that. And so much so, I remember I was kind of aware of that in the moment in my sleep deprived state, but I was like, I've got to document this. So one of the mornings, or whatever time it was, I got up, I took a picture, a selfie, just so I was like, okay, this is, and also Tom and I took a picture in the office when we were doing the late night. So it was an extreme time, but we knew that this was a golden opportunity, and that's the kind of time where you got to pull your finger out and go for it. And we did, and we were delighted to have bought this new business. And part of it, yes, the contracts was great. We were kind of doubling the size of our business, but a big part of it was an offshore office. So they had built, as part of their team, they had a team in London, but they also had a team on the Black Sea in Varna in Bulgaria, country I'd never visited before. And there's about 10 staff out there. So one of the first things we did was get on a flight to go and meet potentially our new team. And they were key. We quite quickly worked out they were key to running the existing business, which we were sort of turning the lights back on. Lights had gone off on Monday, lights back on Thursday. Let's get this going again. We've got a busy summer coming up and some owners to appease. And so that was massive for us, because suddenly we realized there's a different way of doing this. And now it's become quite common, certainly over here, of this idea of having, offshore support in some way, whether it's in as far-flung as the Philippines or whether it's in somewhere in Europe. So we decided to build that team, and that team today has 100 staff. So it's 10x, and is a key part of what we do. And it's to be clear, it's fully owned and managed by us. I go out there probably about 4 times a year. We work with that team very closely. It's 25% of our total workforce. So,
and let's underestimate the power of keeping an existing team together. We've talked about this on multiple occasions. We talk about it. If I think back to Jennifer Mooch's podcast, the importance of team, we talk about that, if you're acquiring a company and that team knows the homeowners and the team knows the processes and you're new to it, if they're good people and they're hard workers and they believe and they bleed that company already, why not keep them? It baffles me, these companies that come in and they just completely, wipe the slate clean and try to start over. I mean, you're losing so much. And I applaud you and your team for getting there as quick as possible and keeping that team in line. And then obviously, taking care of them. And now, 4Xing that team in the time you've been there. That's super important, and not enough people are doing that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a very good point. And I think at the time, because it was not as well known, it was, I remember speaking to other people in the industry, and there's sort of a few raised eyebrows about it, and they didn't really understand how it could work. But it's definitely one of those decisions where in hindsight, you look back and you're like, wow, that was a good one. We got that one right. And you're totally right about the value. So much of the value was in that team. If we look back in the grand scheme of things, the units that we took on, which we will still have a percentage of those units today, but it's nothing relative to the overall business. Those units, the revenue from them will be a tiny percentage, whereas that team is everything to the business, and it's something I remember when we took over, we had one small office, then we moved into another, then we moved to another, and then most recently we took one of the biggest offices in the city on the main square. So that's an extraordinary journey for them to have gone through, and some of the managers there, and a lot of that original team, so the 10 staff we had initially are still there today, and they've gone through us on that journey in the last 5 years. So that was definitely a big moment and a great learning experience for all of us. I guess following on from that, the next, so that was 2017, then continued to grow again organically, independently. But 2018 was, to Matteo's point, when we started to meet. We were a bit more outward looking. I think up until that point, there weren't many of us running the business. Tom and I were fully involved, and it was, it dominated our lives. And so we were outward looking in terms of the London market, but beyond that, we didn't have the time really or energy to do anything else. So we hadn't really been going to the conferences and seeing what's out there in the same way that some businesses had, but we started doing that in 2018. And that's when we began to meet some familiar faces. You mentioned Goncalo in Portugal, who is very similar founder story, running an independent business in Lisbon. Same with Michael in Scotland, and another guy called Davide in Milan in Italy. And there were other people we met, of course, but the kind of conversations, you'll probably remember. I mean, you still hear them today, but I think it was particularly right back then. Everyone was talking about consolidation and thinking this is a fragmented market. It was still quite a nascent market, but a fragmented one. And so we were talking about that, but we were thinking, we as independently owned private businesses in our own markets, we're thinking, well, actually, rather than trying to enter the city, raise some money and do it that way, and we'd seen other companies do that, but not overly successfully. Perhaps we kind of put ego aside a bit, merge as equals. Yes, we dilute ourselves as shareholders, but we've got a really good platform for growth. And so, again, to John's point, I mean, when you have a 4-day process when you're buying a company, that's quite stressful. I can tell you, when you're merging 4 companies together over different jurisdictions, different countries, over a period of about a year, really, there's a lot of work and effort that goes into that, and legals and all the rest of it. But we got it done in May 2019 with our new brand, ALTIDO, which stands for A Life That I Dream Of. I always have to get that in because a lot of people don't remember that or know about it. And that's when we launched.
All right, well, repeat that one more time for our listeners.
Yes. So ALTIDO, it's an acronym. It's not a sort of Latin or Italian word, and it stands for A Life That I Dream Of. And that's because we're in the business of fulfilling travelers' dreams. So that's our aim, is to delight the guest, be a guest-facing hospitality brand in the short-term rental.
What's interesting with that is it's the acronym, normally you hear an acronym, it's like, oh, okay, that's an acronym, right? And you wouldn't necessarily think ALTIDO is an acronym, but because it sounds, it is your brand. ALTIDO it sounds luxury. It comes across as exactly what you want it to come across as, and it's also a pretty phenomenal acronym.
It sounds like high, like altitude, like ALTIDO. So when I think of it, I think of like high standards. I think of, high lofty ambition. And I remember when we were having these conversations at VRMA in Prague, and you were telling me we were talking about this. One of the things that I appreciated about what you were doing at that time, nobody was doing what you were doing with the amount of humility, and like all of you had like these businesses and you were talking about merging and strength together, but it was done in such a way where the egos weren't there. It wasn't like, oh, I have this business and I have this business and we're jockeying to see, who's going to lead this thing. No, the ambition in your eyes, like you guys had a goal and you knew that you were stronger together, and the way that you just talked about what you were doing with this space. And I don't even know if you'd announced like the whole, where you guys were going with ALTIDO yet. Like you guys were on like the precipice of like really pushing it out there. But I remember like we hadn't seen anything like that in the States at the time. And when you looked at the management structure, and the markets were very different in Europe and in the US, right? Like, when we're talking about companies in the US going to a different state, in Europe, you're going to a different country, right? Like, and that's just exponentially more challenging when you look at merging together businesses and growing and expanding and scaling a business. It's not like you're just crossing state lines, you're crossing country lines, like passport, like all of these
currency
things.
different,
It was vastly complex. But to have that vision at that time and to be actively engaging in a way that I hadn't seen our business community acting, I hadn't seen that side of our business looking to scale that way. was really novel. It was very different at the time. And it struck a chord with me, like, damn, like why aren't companies in the US doing this to, build and scale as opposed to the way they build and scale today? So, I don't know if you remember Prague like that, but I was very much so struck by those conversations and thought what you guys were doing was phenomenal.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think 2 points to pick up on there. One is, I think, you're right. The challenges and the complexity are huge. And actually, that's probably, I talked earlier about barriers to entry. There's not that many barriers to entry to setting up a company in our space.
Mhm.
There are a lot of barriers to entry to doing what we did, not just the complexity, but also as founders, sort of the risk profile of thinking, like, this is a big decision. And if this backfires, that's, there's no going back. So actually, I think inevitably there aren't that many businesses and individuals out there who are really able to make that step, because we were talking to a few businesses at the time. And in the end, it was the four of us who were like, yeah, we're going to do it. And it is that leap of faith. So I
Think, trust.
yeah,
it's a trust
exactly.
issue. Like, this is your livelihood. This is your families. This is, this is potentially generational wealth or building up to this that you're putting on the line based on trust and a shared vision and goal. And, 1 weak link, I mean, you're potentially fucked. And so it's pretty phenomenal that, at that time it's 4, and we'll talk about, now it's even bigger where it's going, but it all comes back to trust in my eyes.
Yeah, it's massively that. And it's trust, but there's always the leap. And I think you have to factor in that kind of calculated gamble and risk. And I guess as entrepreneurs in general, you got to have some risk appetite, because you wouldn't be there otherwise. But obviously, though, we were speaking to lots of people, it's just, actually, that's not for us. We're not ready to go to that next step. But I think if we looked at the alternative, what was the alternative? Certainly that's the way I looked at it. We had a nice independent business in London, which was growing. But there's a risk in just staying in one market in one city. Yeah. You don't know what's going to happen with the regulation. You don't know if there's going to be a black swan. And you also have to think about your own ambitions. Where do you want to go? And we wanted to be a big international, credible business, create a big brand that people knew about, and something that we were proud of and were excited by. And to do that, there aren't that many options. I mean, the one which was most prevalent at the time was go to a VC and raise as much money as you can, and then just go to a city with a sort of blank checkbook and spend a lot on marketing and hope for the best. And it didn't turn out very well.
Right. Or how would they do it here in the States is you just go and you with a big check and be like, I'm going to buy you and buy you and buy you. And it's a little different.
That's a really good point. People weren't really doing it then. They're doing it a bit more now. But that's definitely our, what's happened. We've acquired a few small businesses along the way. And that's definitely, if we're entering a brand new market or a new city, that would be the way we would ideally do it. And again, it's not just acquiring the business, but it's the acqui-hire bit as well. It's getting that local knowledge. It's getting that, that founder who's there in the business, and then incentivizing him in the same way we were to see like the bigger picture and the bigger dream. And that's when you have something a bit more stable and a bit more real and tangible on the ground that can turn into its success. I think if you don't do that and you just come in fresh and just think you can learn about the market really quickly and you'll be able to like take market share off the incumbents is actually quite a big challenge. So yeah, it's a good point.
So talk to me about what you've learned in this process, because having your co-founders there with you and having grown and the fact that y'all are still together in today, talk to me a little bit about how that leadership dynamic played out. Like, I see you in the CEO role now, right? Like there's had to be some learning lessons from that time into, kind of where you are today, where you're leading today, and how you lead. How do you lead, a group full of other leaders, right? How do you lead a group of other business owners in that space and still keep the relationship, keep the focus, keep the dynamic, keep, the essential team spirit around, this entity and what you guys are focused on doing in a way that lasts without egos, without the other things that tend to break businesses and partnerships apart? Like, how did you do that? How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and one we were very mindful of from the start, but and spoke about a lot. But even so, we've got to where we are, and I think it worked out in the end. But there's, again, with the no BS hat on, I would have done it differently now, knowing what I know, because this was all new to us again. So we were inevitably naive about some stuff. But there's definitely a few things I would have done differently in height, which I think would have made things a bit easier and a bit quicker, and we'd have been able to progress a bit faster. And one of the things is when we were doing the merger, a lot of the focus was on the legals, and that takes a long time. There's a lot of work that has to be done to get that process done. And so it sort of kind of by being a bit fatigued by that whole process, it was kind of like a lot of the energy was just like, let's just get this done. And then once that's done, then we can work out the rest. And a lot of that is true. You don't have time to focus on working out exactly what the future business is going to look like. But one thing I would have done if I did this again, or if I do this again, is have clearer conversations at the start about what the future management team is, rather than working that out as you go along. Because I think that just sets the tone and dynamic early on, and it just makes the decision-making process a lot easier. We knew as a group, and people would tell us, that the biggest challenge you are going to have of bringing 4 companies together is you're bringing 4 sets of founders and entrepreneurs, all with their own ideas. That's going to be your biggest problem, because you're going to be pulled in all sorts of different direction. And for us, for sure, it was, we acknowledged that, we spoke about that, we said, look, that is going to be the challenge. And I think our solution was, at the time, which was one way of doing it, was we were going to have rule by committee for a bit, which we did do, which was functional, but I wouldn't say was your ideal, blueprint of how you want to do it. Like we were able to make decisions, we could move forward, but it wasn't sort of the best and most efficient way. And then the other thing, which I think was a good idea, is to say, look, rather than us trying to get behind one person or someone putting themselves forward, getting someone totally independent from us might be a better way of saying, look, well, it's not about any of us and about our egos and about the legacy we bring. Let's use someone else who's independent, and then we all get behind him. And we spoke about this earlier, Matteo. We got a guy from the US called Billy. And he had some experience in the US market, came over to Europe. So that was in end of 2019, I think. So the first few months we were sort of ruled by committee, and then we brought in Billy. And Billy was with us for about 6 months. And that was really important for the formation of kind of the ALTIDO spirit, and making sure that the separate companies didn't run as independent businesses, but ran as a cohesive unit. But then COVID hit, and then all bets were off, because then you just doubled down or quadrupled down on everything, and you don't know whether you're going to be able to keep the business going. So Billy went back to America. That was a mutual decision between us. It just wasn't going to work keeping on, senior management.
Wait, was Billy?
Yeah, Billy. Shout out to Billy O'Sullivan, man. Yeah, he's a friend. He's a friend of the show. We know Billy well. I understand that situation.
That was at PMI, I think. You spent a little bit of time with PMI. Okay, exactly. I'm sitting here trying to cite. I'm like, I think I know who this is.
Yeah.
That's the man. Yeah, and it was at that, and then COVID hit, and then you're in a crisis situation, and in a way, crisis situations can be, they're painful, but they can be quite good in terms of decision making, because you don't have time. You'd have to just say, okay, guys, we can't sort of debate this for too long. And so I put myself forward to say, look, I've got a pretty good steer on, I was working in the business quite closely with some of the key teams. Whilst we go through this storm, there's a few goals we need to focus on, and we have a vacuum of leadership right now, and we need one of us to step up. So I put myself forward. The guys backed me, which was great and really appreciated. And then it was a case of just riding out the storm. And we did that to varying degrees of success over the following, 2020 particularly tough. 2021 we came out of it. And then 2022 has been our greatest year on record. And it's just been brilliant to finally really see, I only realized this recently when I look back. If you think about the ALTIDO dream, 2019 was a good year, but it was still early days and scrappy. Yeah. And then COVID took out 2 years. This year was the fruition of, okay, we took a risk with ALTIDO. What's it going to turn out? Was that the right decision? And I think we proved ourselves in the market, particularly in Europe, as one of the leading voices, leading forces. We're very profitable. We're a successful business. We've got incredibly large team, and now we're growing that team because we've done this deal with a larger company. So now we're going to be in France and Spain as well. So
wow,
it's and new product lines as well. So that hopefully gets you almost up to present day. But you can see it's been a wild journey of all sorts of different.
It's interesting.
I mean, yeah, these past 2 years alone, right? And John, I mean to get you out, but I'll let you go. Like, COVID for y'all was very different than COVID for us, right? Like at the end of the day, like the lockdowns that you had in countries in Europe, Spain, and it was like you couldn't leave, right? Like there was no industry. In the US, we saw bumps because, you know, people could go rent places and stay there and still drive and travel and walk and be outside, like in a lot of different places. We don't know shutdowns like y'all did. And to be able to survive that in a hospitality space where you can't move is, again, I don't think we understand the, you know, on this side of the pond, what that's really like. And the complexity, I could only imagine having to steer a hospitality business through that.
So, yeah, I mean, certain markets only had, you know, were I mean, it was gloom and doom. Florida was shut down, and these certain markets were for like 2 months, and then they had the best year ever. Like there was so much. And again, you mentioned this, you know, how like it's never great, like a pandemic or anything, a disaster of any sort of sign isn't like a great thing, right? But you know, those that had the solid foundations came through it very quickly, and you see that overseas too. If you had a solid foundation, you're going to be able to ride through it. Those that were built on, you know, a house of cards, they quickly, you know, were reacquired by somebody else who had a more solid foundation, and then that helped them scale exponentially. But you know, it's interesting because, you know, 2 years of nothing, where us it was like 2 months. Yeah, it's a huge difference. And then it was the best year. You know, now we're starting to see, you know, it come down to like a plateau, which is still higher than 2019, but it wasn't where it was, you know, right after the pandemic, which was like the best year ever. I'm curious to hear about your new venture. And then I also want to talk about some macroeconomics in this, you know, pre-recession, entering recession, and you know, what are your ideas and forecasts globally for our industry? You know, because it's scary times again, but in a different way. You know, and I think it's not as scary as I think. My personal opinion is that, yeah, things are gonna, again, you're gonna separate, and you know. And I hate using this analogy, the men from the boys, because it seems pretty sexist, but you know, you understand what I'm trying to get across. But yeah, so talk a little bit about this new conglomerate. Maybe not conglomerate's the wrong word, but the new partnerships you have moving forward, and what you're going to do with that.
Sure. Well, just to pick up on the COVID point, I mean, you're right, guys. I think it was definitely different over here. I mean, 2020 was really a write-off. Like our revenue was massively down, and we were losing, hemorrhaging money. You know, we were made a big loss in 2020. 2021, we kind of we were still down on 2019 numbers. We're probably breaking even at best. And then this year for us was, you know, that was when it really, for the urban market in Western Europe, that was when things really bounced back in just a way that we'd never expected. So that was fantastic for us. But what we were doing along that journey, you know, one of the things as independently owned businesses was we thought, well, we'll create this platform to raise money, because then we could grow at a pretty fast rate, and we could be quite strategic with the money that we raised. And in 2021, you know, we put that on pause due to COVID. But in 2021, we were thinking, okay, well, we're not quite sure where COVID's going, but now's the time to build out again. And you know, that dream of raising money and growing this business is, you know, we need to write a business plan for that. So we did that, and we went out to market. And one of the first people we spoke to was this company I mentioned. It's a kind of adjacent industry, so co-living, student living, managing beds. They do a rent-to-rent model, mainly in Italy, but also in France and Spain, or via acquisition, actually. So they acquired one of the largest players in France and acquired a player in Spain, and they've been growing out those 3 markets. So there's some good synergies, because we were already in Italy and we were doing the short let side. They were doing, you know, 6 months to a year long stays. We were doing 1 week stays. We're all in Western Europe, but we're in the UK and Portugal, where they're not. And we got speaking to them about an investment in us so that they can get some exposure to the short let market. And you talked earlier about trust. You know, we met these guys. We got on really well with them. We began to get to know them. It was, you know, very Italian. We went for some lovely dinners in Italy, which is all part of the process. And then we, you know, I think both sides realized, actually, again, a bit like what we did with Altido, there's a really interesting play to do something dynamic and shake up this industry again. And there's a lot of synergies between our businesses. So we essentially, they acquired 100% of Altido, but we share swapped into the larger entity. So I'm now a shareholder of this larger group. And that business is called Dove Vivo, which is in Italian means where I live. And so then again, now we've got a bigger team. I'm working with these new people. We are short letting some of their units. Equally, they're looking at some of our units where we can do co-living. So it's the post-COVID landscape. The way people live and work, we all know, has changed dramatically. And so we think and hope that we're creating a business which kind of mirrors that for this future, where you've sort of got a one-stop shop. So there'll be a new brand coming out next year, and we're still working a lot of stuff out internally, just like we did when we did the Altido merger. But it's been another new experience. It's been a great one. We're really excited about what we're going to build.
Is the new brand, William? Is the new brand, are you axing Altido altogether, or you're gonna coexist like multi-brand?
Yeah, so at the moment we're in that process. We're working with a branding agency, and that's a key question that we've been looking at. Initially, what will happen is there'll be an umbrella brand that will be launched in Q1. So that covers, because we've got 3 brands. Actually, we've got one in France, one in Italy, and then the short let one. Once that umbrella brand is launched, it will be Altido by X for a period of time, most likely. And then in future, there will be some sub brands to distinguish which product you're engaging with. So something like, X Travel or X Living, depending on which product line you're engaging with us on. But I mean, that's early days, and we'll try some things out, and we'll work with that team to launch that next year.
It's so interesting. Like we dive into brand all the time, and we love brand and how strong it is in what, it's how important it is. And it's so interesting, like when you have a strong brand like Altido, right, which is a very strong brand. It's recognized. It's the word alone, we've talked about this earlier in the podcast already. But when there is definitely a conversation to be had to keep it. Then there's a conversation they had to, and then with the living, and which is also very strong, and these are tough decisions. This isn't like a very we'll go ahead and do this, because you put a lot of time and money and effort and focus and there's analytics and case studies, and there's all this behind the scenes talking, giving you every reason to keep Altido. But then overall, then you have to have the sense as in a company to look at the bigger picture, and not 2023, not 2024, but we're talking 2030. What does that look like? Yeah. Right. Because, anytime you switch brand, in those that, in marketing and know this, you're going to take a dip. Like, it doesn't matter what you say and there will be a dip. And then how quickly does that bounce back? And I love this. I mean, it's this kind of stuff I like nerding out on.
Well, I can tell, because I mean, you very astutely have just summarized many of the conversations we've been having internally. And the way I look at it, and this is sometimes harder for some of the team who, they do get very loyal and very embedded just internally to a brand. Yeah. But the way I look at it is exactly that in terms of the long-term vision. And we've been through this already, because our baby was the London Residence Club.
Right.
So back then, that was a much harder thing to say, oh, okay, we're going to Altido, but what's going to be the damage? And actually, that brand's really strong and the clients like it. Maybe can we just have that as a sub-brand, like London Residence Club by Altido? And that would have been the wrong decision. But I remember saying at the time, like, oh, actually, I'm not sure. But actually, it was so important with that just to bind this into one company rather than a collection of 4 separate companies, to say, look, we are one company, we are one brand. That's really important just for the staff internally. And then in terms of, if you're really wanting to double down and have an impact on the market, in the wider press and in the industry, just consolidating into one brand that you can hit people with Altido. We've seen that over the last 3 years. that's had a big impact. People won't remember the other 4 brands that they were, whereas this one is really important. And we're just going through that same phase again, I believe, but just at a higher magnitude. And so now I'm actually, that was great. I loved the Altido journey. It was fantastic. I like the brand. I like where we've taken it. But I'm now more than ready to say, okay, cool. I'm seeing the bigger picture. We're building a really big company here. We've got, as the wider group, we've raised significant amounts of capital. Turnover is significant. We've got over 400 staff. There's only a few routes you go as a company like this, one of which may be IPO. And you have to think about, okay, you have to go to the next level again and get your head in that headspace, which is a new challenge for us every single time. But I think because we've done it a few times, then it comes a bit easier. There's going to be things you're learning. There's there's going to be things you don't know, but you're like, okay, we did it before, it worked out. This is just doing that again. The stakes are a bit higher, but it's exciting, and that's why we're in this journey in the first place.
But my question is, I guess it never really goes up. Well, and this is different. And this is, I think with Altida, it's different because it's an idea, right? It's ingrained in the DNA, a life that I dream of. Like, how does that not translate into whatever comes next, right? Like, to me, when I see that, when I see you and the people that have been exposed to you and see the things that you do next, right? Like, that's always going to come to mind, right? Like, I don't know that even if, however you transition or whatever comes next, it seems like that's still going to always be ingrained in it as a piece of the culture because of the idea and because of what we do in hospitality and because of what we, what brands do in experiences and in courting guests and what we want our guests and our managers. Like, it's when you think of a life that I dream of, it's so broad, but so appropriate to our space because it fits in so many different ways. Like, what are you working towards? The things that you dream of, what are your guest experiences? What do they dream of? Right. Like, and even for you guys, like, what are you building as a company? What do you dream of? Like, and to me, that's so powerful in and of itself. Right. And so taking that, how does that not excite you I mean, it has to excite you in terms of whatever you guys are going to be building next.
Well, I'm really glad you said that because it's something that I can 100% agree with, but I haven't thought about. And so now I will take that back because I can tell you, and I'm glad that you felt it in the industry felt it, because internally that's something we have built massively over the last 3 years, is to ingrain that in part of our culture. We have surveys each year on an annual basis where we asked our staff, what is your dream? And this is not about work-wise, what is their dream, a realistic one that you want to fulfill. And then we draw names out of the hat and we fulfill the dreams for those people. So one guy goes skydiving, one guy gets his
I'm going to let you know.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
So as you point out, it is ingrained. So we've created that culture and we will carry that forward. And that is in the way we treat our guests, our owners, and treat ourselves internally. So no doubt, some of the stuff we've done with Altido will feed its way into the new vision, the new values that we create that we're working on.
I can almost see that being part of your mission statement of the,
how can it not be? What other brand makes you feel that way or makes you think about that? Even in terms of a tagline that's so broad ranging, like name another brand that makes you feel good in that way, that gives you that kind of, I can't think of one off the top of my head yet. Talking about branding all the time, right? So. Right.
Yeah, I can't either. I know we don't have that much time left, but I want to definitely, but before we get out of here, I want to chat about, okay, we know where you're going. We know the plan, at least, right? We know it's coming together. The plan. There's a rebrand coming. We're all excited to kind of see it and see it launch out. But what happens? We're looking at 2023. We're looking at 2024. There's the R word is here. There's, people aren't going to make it again, but are you worried? Are you poised to knowing that again, is it going to be a pause? Is it going to be, what do you see if you're using your, magic ball here and you're forecasting?
Yes. So I'm probably not going to give a very satisfactory answer because in a way I want to come full circle to kind of what I said at the start about how we started this business and how it wasn't this grand vision. And in a way, when I look back over the last 7 years, particularly with my conversations with Tom, who was my original co-founder, and we've known each other for years, very close. And one of the values we had just between us was always hold things lightly, because it's you don't know what's going to come around the corner. So certainly celebrate the successes, and thank your team, and you know, we've had a fantastic year this year. We've had some great Christmas parties, and so there's been a lot of excitement at the end of the year, which is good. But the other thing is you know, having that, one of our other values is staying humble, and that's a company value, and I think that humility is really important. So that's not to say don't have a plan and don't prepare. You know, that wouldn't be prudent. But I know enough about what we've seen over the last 7 years that over planning and overthinking hasn't necessarily got us to where we meant to be. In fact, actually coming at it the opposite and just building things slowly, doing it on your own way, doing it in an independent way, often kind of regardless of what's going on in the external market, has served us well. Clearly, things have changed. We're a much larger business now, and we could not afford, you know, we have our responsibilities as, you know, I'm sitting on the board of ALTIDO. You have to think about these things. Right. And so if you really push me for the answer, I'm naturally quite optimistic and bullish. I've seen what's happened this year. I can see our booking window, and nothing massively is changing at the moment. Next year looks like we're going to be in good shape as well. But I also look at the fundamentals that we put down. Our team, we've got a team that are really experienced now, that we've trained over time. I trust them. I know they can deliver. Our strategy in terms of our inventory, we've diversified our portfolio massively. So that can only help to deal with any pressures that might come. We're across different geographies, different cities, and we manage different types of inventory. That synergy I mentioned earlier, yes, we can do the short let, but we can switch that very easily to a mid let or a long let. So I think there will be some bumps in the road, but if you've taken on COVID, none of them scare me. And I think, you know, we know the markets we are in are strong. They're still, a lot of them are supply constrained. The demand is still there. I may look foolish in a year's time if we're having this conversation, but right now I think I'm really confident where we're at. We're very well financed as well.
I'm going to actually, you know, I'll put my prediction out here. It's very comparable to your prediction. My prediction is, you know, is still more of a bullish prediction. I think things that will change are things like booking windows and seasonality. These are going to change a little bit. You're going to look at your traveler might change because they're waiting longer and longer and longer to make sure things are good before they're going to go ahead and book. They're going to make sure they have their finance. So things are going to change, but overall, it's not going to be an astounding dip. I think it's going to be a decently strong 2023. That's my prediction. I think we'll see more landscape changes as, you know, those that are scared are like, screw it, I'm done. I made it through this, but no, I don't want to go through this. But I don't think it's going to be the upturn that, you know, some are predicting. I'm pretty comparable in my prediction for 2023.
Good to know.
Yeah, we'll see where that lands. But regardless, you know, one of the things we're definitely going to do is have you and get the team back. Actually, next time I want to get the whole team on here, man, and talk about, you know, we'll do a recap, and then we'll talk about, you know, how the year's gone, and talk about all the good things that the new partnership you guys are bringing to the table is doing. So, you know, we'll definitely love to have you guys back. But good luck, man. I'm rooting for you. I know the way in which you guys operate has always been very smart, and, you know, taking lots of risk while opening up the markets, opening up ideas, and opening up, you know, the markets and the brand to growth. And, you know, so I wish you and the team all the best in this year coming up, and looking forward to watching your success.
That's very kind. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And I hope we get to meet in person at a conference in 2023.
Man, let's make that a goal this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And
super nice meeting you, Will.
Thanks for joining us.
Cheers, guys.
This podcast is a Hospitality.fm production.